From a U.S. Open champion getting dragged off the course by police, to someone who became the face of a civil war that split golf in half. These are the 10 most hated players in golf history. Let's start with number 10. 10. Fuzzy Zoeller. Fuzzy Zoeller is an interesting one because for a long time he wasn't a villain at all. He was the fun guy. The guy who joked around, who didn't act like golf needed to be a museum. And that's why this fall into hate hits harder. It wasn't built over years. It was one moment that hit him like a slap. After Tiger Woods won the Masters in 1997, Zoeller made comments that were widely condemned and seen as racist once they aired nationally, including referring to Tiger as "that little boy" and saying he should serve fried chicken and collard greens at the champions' dinner. The backlash was fast, and it had real consequences. Kmart ended its sponsorship relationship with him after reviewing the remarks. Fans reacted too, and the golf world basically made a decision right there. We're not letting this slide. And the brutal part is, in golf, you don't get to outgrow something like that easily. You can win again. You can smile for the cameras. You can say sorry. But for a lot of people, that moment becomes the headline that follows your name forever. So Zoeller lands at 10, not because he was the most hated for the longest, but because he shows how fast golf can turn on you when you cross a line. Now, player number 9, Vijay Singh. Vijay Singh is the kind of player who makes golf fans uneasy for a specific reason. With him, you're constantly separating greatness from trust. On the course, he was a machine, a workhorse, the type of pro who looked like he could hit balls for 12 hours, then hit another bucket because one fade didn't sit right. But his reputation took hits at the edges of the story. Early on, he was banned in 1985 after an alleged scorecard doctoring incident at the Indonesian Open, something writers have noted followed him for years, even as he rebuilt his career. Then decades later, in 2013, he admitted to using a deer antler spray in a Sports Illustrated story, which the tour treated as a banned substance under its anti-doping policy. The PGA Tour opened a case, later dropped it, and Singh sued the tour over how the situation was handled. That's why his hate isn't usually the loud stadium booing kind. It's colder. People look at the impressive resume and still keep him at arm's length. And speaking of golf's obsession with rules, number 8 became a symbol for one of the most divisive rules debates ever. 8. Craig Stadler. Craig Stadler didn't become infamous because he was obnoxious or disrespectful. He became infamous because of something so unbelievably golf, it almost sounds like a parody. A towel. At Torrey Pines in 1987 during the Andy Williams San Diego Open, Stadler had a nasty lie under a tree on the 14th hole of the third round. The ground was wet, so he hit the shot from his knees and put a towel under them to keep his pants dry. Here's the twist. Under the rules at the time, that could be interpreted as building a stance. TV viewers called it in, officials reviewed it, and the towel meant a 2-stroke penalty should have been added. Stadler didn't know that when he signed his card, so he'd signed for the wrong score, which meant he was disqualified after the round. And the reaction wasn't just nerdy rules talk. A lot of people framed it as cheating. Purists were furious because it looked like creating an advantage. The more casual golf fans said, this is exactly why golf drives people crazy. A guy gets nuked over a towel. That's why he belongs on this countdown. Not because everyone hated Craig Stadler as a person, but because this incident turned him into a permanent topic of debate. The name people bring up whenever they want to argue about integrity, enforcement, and how unforgiving golf can be. But now, we're about to go further back, to a man who was hated because being paired with him was basically torture. Number 7. Cyril Walker. Cyril Walker is a name most modern golf fans don't know, but his story is one of the wildest stories you'll ever hear. Walker won the U.S. Open in 1924. That should have made him a permanent piece of golf history. But what followed was a reputation so bad it became legendary. He was glacially slow, combustible, and constantly irritated. And in 1929, his pace of play became so extremely slow that officials disqualified him at the Los Angeles Open. That's already insane, but it gets worse. Walker refused to leave the course after being disqualified. He argued. He stayed. And eventually, the situation escalated so far that police physically carried him off the course. Imagine that today. A tour pro getting removed like someone who won't leave a bar at closing time. And the story doesn't end with golf. It turns tragic. Walker reportedly built wealth after his U.S. Open win, lost almost everything after the 1929 stock market crash, ended up homeless, and later asked to sleep in a jail cell at a Hackensack, New Jersey police station, where he died of pneumonia that night. Now, if Walker was hated for being slow and difficult, the next guy is the opposite. He was electric, a genius, a hero, and yet, he still drove opponents crazy. Number 6. Seve Ballesteros. Putting Sev on a most hated list feels wrong until you remember what hate actually means in sports. Hate doesn't always mean the whole world dislikes you. Sometimes it means you inspire extreme reactions. And Seve absolutely did. To fans, Seve was magic. He was imaginative. The guy who could hit a shot out of a parking lot and make it feel like art. He made golf emotional. But to some opponents and officials, Sev could be exhausting because he didn't just compete, he battled. If you want an example, look at the Ryder Cup. His tension with Paul Azinger became part of the folklore, with disputes over drops and rules, moments that opponents viewed as gamesmanship. And later in his career, the friction got more direct. In 2003, Seve clashed publicly with European Tour officials over slow play enforcement, made inflammatory comments about referees, and was fined. That's why he belongs here. Seve wasn't hated because he was boring or robotic. He was hated because he was powerful enough to become a problem, a beloved genius who could still leave rivals and referees thinking, "Here we go again." Okay, now we move to player number 5, Colin Montgomerie. Colin Montgomerie is the classic case of the crowd deciding you're the villain, and you never escaping it. Monty was intense and proud, sometimes to the point of being prickly, and in golf, that can either read as confidence or arrogance. Once fans choose the second interpretation, it becomes a loop you can't break. Because here's how it goes. Crowd boos you, you react crowd boos harder, and suddenly, your entire identity becomes the guy they love to boo. Montgomerie took a ton of abuse from spectators, especially in Ryder Cup atmospheres where the energy is already tribal. The clearest example is Brookline in 1999. U.S. fans famously taunted him with the Mrs. Doubtfire chant, and the abuse got so ugly that his father reportedly left after just a handful of holes. Even Payne Stewart ended up defending him, and the uglier it got, the more it fed the story that he was thin-skinned, angry, and at war with golf fans. Now add one more ingredient. Monty wasn't some nobody. He was elite. He was a Ryder Cup pillar. He was a superstar in Europe, which makes the hate more fascinating. Because it wasn't based on irrelevance, it was based on presence. And if Monty was the crowd's villain, the next guy was the locker room villain, the kind of player other pros didn't always enjoy dealing with. Number 4. Rory Sabatini. Rory Sabatini's hate came from inside the sport, not just from people watching it. He built a reputation as blunt, impatient, and difficult. The kind of guy where even neutral moments feel tense because you're waiting for him to snap. And then came the moment that sealed the image. In 2005, Sabatini was paired with Ben Crane, a player who had a reputation for slow play. Sabatini got so fed up that he basically staged a protest mid-round, playing ahead, walking up the fairway, and turning it into a public scene. Now, here's the important part. Slow play is one of the most emotional issues in golf. Fans argue about it constantly. Players quietly hate it. Nobody wants to be the guy holding up the course. So when Sabatini did that, some people cheered him like he was standing up for everyone, and others saw it as disrespectful, childish, and humiliating. And that's why he's on this list. He's polarizing in a way that feels real, not manufactured, not media-driven. It's the kind of reputation that's built from consistent friction. Now, moving on to the next player on our list, number 3, Johnny Miller. Johnny Miller is one of the few guys on this list who's hated primarily for his commentary. As a player, Miller was brash, flashy outfits, big confidence, the whole deal. But as a broadcaster, he became something else. The guy who would say what everyone else wouldn't, and sometimes what everyone else shouldn't. Some fans loved him because he was honest. He didn't sugarcoat. But other fans saw him as arrogant and mean-spirited, and critics often accused him of shoehorning his own accomplishments into the broadcast, like he was still competing from the booth. And the moment that sticks in a lot of people's memory is 2008 at the US Open, when he took a shot at Rocco Mediate with a line that felt less like analysis and more like a cheap insult. He said Rocco looked like the guy who cleans Tiger's swimming pool, and even added that guys named Rocco don't get on the trophy. That's why Miller is here. Not because he's evil, but because he created a rare phenomenon in golf. An ex-player and now commentator with a loyal hate following. Now, if Miller was hated for what he said, the next guy was hated for what he represented. An ego, a legend, and a war for control of golf itself. Number 2. Greg Norman. Greg Norman is one of the most fascinating characters in golf history because he's both a hero and a villain depending on who you're asking. On pure golf, he's untouchable. 331 weeks at world number 1. But the reason he's polarizing is this. In the 2000s, Norman became the CEO and public frontman of Live Golf, the league that challenged the PGA Tour head-on. Once that happened, he stopped being just a golfer. He became a symbol. If you're pro-Live, he's the disruptor who forced change. If you're anti-Live, he's the guy who helped tear the sport in half. Players jumping tours, sanctions, lawsuits, fans picking sides like it's politics. That's why he's number 2. Few figures in modern golf have sat at the center of more anger, division, and non-stop debate. But number 1 is the player who managed to sustain villain status across eras, not just one controversy, not just one phase, but a career-long pattern that kept resurfacing. Number 1. Sergio Garcia. Sergio Garcia is number 1 because his most hated case doesn't rely on a single incident. Sergio was always insanely talented, but alongside that talent, he built a reputation that kept dragging him back into the same story. Outbursts, complaining, ugly moments, public regrets, then another flare-up later. Just to name a few. The 2007 spitting incident, the 2013 Tiger Woods fried chicken remark, and the 2019 Saudi international disqualification for damaging greens. And in golf, there is one thing fans hate more than anything else: acting entitled. Sergio, at his worst, gave people that impression, that the world was against him, that bad luck was stalking him, that the rules were unfair, that everyone else was the problem. And once fans decide you're that guy, Every mistake you make becomes proof. That's why Sergio sits at number 1. He became the kind of player crowds boo, not because they don't recognize his talent, but because they're tired of the drama that comes attached to it.